Emulators, popular, requested, and controversial. If you want to play retro games from all systems, they're usually one of the first options to consider. In some cases, you can get official emulator machines. As you probably know, this thing here is an NES Mini, a curious thing made by Nintendo running on an all-winner Cortex A7 ARM SoC, which runs a custom Linux NES emulator that plays ROMs from a 512MB memory. So yep, this is a Linux computer running an NES emulator, just an official one. If you're more into less known hardware, you can take a look at the Bittboy. I get a lot of weird offers for review units on my email these days, but this one caught my eye and I just felt like integrating it in a video somehow. This tiny Game Boy looking machine is actually an NES emulator. It's an interesting device. Did you ever own any of those bootleg Game Boy or NES cards that had like 100 weird games inside? This thing is like that, but made into a full console. It claims to have 129 NES games inside, and I did find a couple of titles that I have enjoyed putting some hours into. On the other hand, you cannot load any more games, so what you see is what you get. You can connect it to a TV to play games on a big screen if you're at home, a cool feature I did not expect, but its tiny size actually makes it very useful as a toy that you can leave in your bag or pocket and pull out every time you have to take a train or make a line. Something that I have done more times than I expected in the last week. Even though they claim the battery only lasts like 3 hours, good thing it is USB charge, so you can use an external phone charger. If you want more info about them, the link is in the description. It's about $40, so it might make a nice present for a gamer. But let's say you, like me, are a tinkerer and you want to experiment with emulators yourself. As everyone has been so kind to remind me, yes, the Raspberry Pi 3 I have used on past videos can, in fact, perfectly run emulators. There's even an official OS called RetroPie that simplifies the whole thing a lot, but emulating NES games like these devices is not difficult, so I started browsing the list of included emulators and something caught my eye. GameCube and PlayStation 2 apparently are not possible in ARM computers like the Pi, but Dreamcast, the third console in that generation, could be done. Dreamcast, a 6th generation game console. Can we get decent performance on Dreamcast games on this tiny computer? And that is what we're going to find out. Before heading out, a disclaimer. I'm doing this as a curious experiment. The distribution of ROMs might be illegal in your country, so please do not ask where to get ROMs of games you do not own or provide links to ROMs in the description, alright? If you have all the proper parts, there's a million guides out there on how to get RetroPie installed on an SD card and into your Raspberry. What I did not know is that Dreamcast emulation is not included out of the box and the documentation for it is often wrong. So getting the whole thing to work took a bit of effort. First, install the emulator from the options and the optional packages. And then you need the DC boot bin and the DC flash bin, 2 files that you can rip from a Dreamcast using the instructions in the description. But in any case, they need to be placed in Home, Pi, RetroPie, BIOS. Finally, games will boot, but the controls are not working. Once again, the documentation has lied to me. To fix it, I had to run a script located on this folder called Raycast joyconfig, where you select your controller and pick the mappings. When done, it will output a bunch of configurations that you need to copy to the file with the controller name in the Home Pi Raycast mappings folder. And after all that, it turns out I could not find a simple way of getting an FPS counter in this emulator no matter what I did. Oh god, what a day. Anyway, the game starts, and it is obvious right away that the performance is not optimal, so now we have an opportunity to make it better. To start, I did a short video on the past of manually overclocking a Raspberry Pi 3, and it turns out the procedure still stands. You can use a terminal on RetroPie by pressing F4, and from there you can change bootconfig.txt to increase the speed of the CPU and GPU. Side note, this is part of the reason why I got this super silly case for the whole thing. It has a fan that is really loud, it's not even funny. But because of this, I was able to overclock the CPU to 1300 and the GPU to 500. Another cool thing we can do has to do with resolution. The Dreamcast outputs video at 640 by 480, which was actually the standard back in that generation of consoles. Hard to believe, right? When I try to play games on that resolution nowadays, I get called a madman. But since we need some extra performance, we can be even more insane and drop it to 320 by 240 in the configuration file located on your Raycast folder called emu.chg. Right, Now that makes it much better. Not smooth, but better than what it was seen before. Sonic Adventure 2 is still the heaviest of the bunch, but at least performance increased enough to pull some tracks and run around. So yes, you can, with some effort, play some Dreamcast games, a 6th generation game console on this tiny ARM computer. Which is good because there's some great games there. I just remember these two being way better back then. Before finishing up, I just wanted to give a short thank you to the people that have been sending me fan art. It really warms up my heart when I receive any of these, so thank you to Corona8 and Appy. Their links are down in the description. I'm going to save this somewhere. Thank you to the people in Patreon who help pay for these channel expenses. I will see you all in the next video.